my people like your guest of being socialist and secular. It's the same reason why James Madison and Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine and many others were forced, and Benjamin Franklin.
The vast majority of American people have always been.
I'm very sorry to say, sir, that people of the stature even of Benjamin Franklin, as well as Mr. Paine, Mr. Madison, Mr. Jefferson, had to be very careful to keep their opinions to themselves, because your equivalents in those days threatened them with persecution if they were honest about the fact that they were not Christian.
Tonight in Raw Politics, a federal judge in Wisconsin has ruled the annual National Day of Prayer is unconstitutional. The judge said the observance, which began more than half a century ago, violates the First Amendment, which bans a law respecting an establishment of religion. Judge Barbara Crabbs said the National Day of Prayer, quote, goes beyond mere acknowledgement of religion because its sole purpose is to encourage all citizens to engage in prayer, an inherently religious exercise that serves no secular function in this context. Now, the White House still plans to recognize this year's Day of Prayer on May 6th. But if the judge's ruling stands, it could be the last one. Joining me now, Vanity Fair contributing editor Christopher Hitchens, author of God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, and Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council and author of Personal Faith, Public Policy. Christopher, the Obama administration wants the National Day of Prayer upheld. The Justice Department is apparently looking into options for appeal. Tony Perkins' group is calling for the judge's impeachment. Why should this be unconstitutional? It's totally optional. No one is forced to pray.
No, but that's why the government shouldn't have a word to say about it. That's why it can't be a national day of prayer that has any government sponsorship. It's as plain as anything could be. The First Amendment is written with admirable clarity. Congress shall make no law respecting any establishment of religion. I look out of my window in Washington, I can see, I don't know how many churches. Everyone can go to them all the time. If you're a Muslim, you're supposed to pray 5 times a day. Just don't bother me with it, and don't ask for the government to endorse it, okay?
Tony, the federal judge in Wisconsin says, and I quote, I understand that many may disagree with that conclusion, and some may even view it as a criticism of prayer or those who pray. That is unfortunate. A determination that the government may not endorse a religious message is not a determination that the message itself is harmful, unimportant, or undeserving of dissemination. Why are you calling for impeachment?
Well, first off, I mean, there's 2 problems here. One, I think this is a case of judicial activism, but also a case of judicial arrogance and ignorance. I mean, first off, this is a district court. District courts are not to set judicial precedent. They're to yield to appellate court precedent or to the Supreme Court precedent. And clearly, this has been a practice since the very first president of the United States, dating back to George Washington. So clearly there's a pattern here, there's a history. And she cites the Lemon test, which is a test that was first adopted in the 1970s regarding school and coercion. There's no coercion here. People have an opportunity to participate in the National Day of Prayer.
But is it really the government's role to be declaring this? I mean, people can pray, as Christopher said, all the time.
Done it from the very beginning.
Look.
Well, I think there's actually a secular purpose here, and that's why I think it goes all the way back to the founders. Even some that Chris has written about, such as Madison, who later, some writings later described him as not being supportive of these calls for prayer. But I think there is a secular purpose because it unites the nation, especially in times of trouble, times of economic downturn, times of war. This has been a practice for presidents since the very beginning of the country.
Would it unite the nation if it was a day of Hindu prayer that was called for, or Muslim prayer, or Jewish prayer?
Well, but see, Christopher...
I mean, I'll tell you what, by the way, please do,
let Christopher finish.
By all means, call me Christopher, if only because it is my name. I thought you were a foe of big government. It's a perfectly plain principle. This is not just a government intruding where it doesn't belong, but it also is establishing, you know what day of prayer this is. This is a day of prayer for Christians. The intent is to import, the idea is to import surreptitiously, to smuggle through customs, the idea that this is a Christian nation, which is part of your own agenda, is it not?
Christopher, this goes all the way back, as I mentioned, to George Washington. In fact, the day after both chambers of Congress adopted the First Amendment, before sending it to the people, they called for a day of prayer. They called upon George Washington to declare a day of prayer and thanksgiving. I mean, and it has clearly been, from the founders, an orientation toward the Christian faith. That's why today we still have about 80% of the American people identify themselves as Christian.
That's nothing, even if that was true, it would be a tyranny of the majority in this case. As you know, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison...
I don't get
Thomas Jefferson and James Madison,
one judge...
Well, we're talking about the principle. I don't care which judge it is. Whatever judge said this wasn't constitutional would be correct. That's not, I don't care which part of Wisconsin
I don't see how one district judge,
then you're changing the subject.
has somehow greater wisdom than every president who has led this country, and it's over 230 years.
James Madison was opposed. James Madison, who is the author of the, James Madison, who with Thomas Jefferson was the author of the original Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom that became the First Amendment, was against even having chaplains in Congress or the armed forces, and he refused to call for days of prayer.
No, Christopher, you know that was discovered in writings 100 years after he died, which was
what difference
totally
does that
inconsistent
make?
with the positions
What difference does that make?
Well, it's totally inconsistent. Totally inconsistent. If you let me finish, I'll answer your question.
Let me try to jump in here.
People like him then.
Inconsistent.
Tony, to Christopher's point about the federal.
Can I finish?
Let me ask you about Christopher's point earlier about the federal government involvement in this. I mean, because a lot of people who don't want the federal government involved in many aspects of their lives seem to be arguing in favor of this notion of the federal government having this National Day of Prayer. Well, is there is there a certain hypocrisy there, or double standard?
What's next? No. I mean, there's no one is being compelled to pray. No one is being. The government is not demanding. What happened yesterday was the government compelling you to pay taxes. Calling the nation to set aside a day of prayer voluntarily is not compelling anyone to do anything.
Actually, you should know,
that's what
sir,
this is about.
You should know that it's Congress that has the power of the purse, not government. I'm sorry to have to keep telling you
things.
Well,
Congress is the one who is.
You ought already to know it's Congress that has the power of the purse.
Beginning in 19.
Can you tell me when this day? Can you tell me where this National Day of Prayer originated? What date? Can you, in fact?
As it is now, in 1988 is when Congress set a date.
Yes.
But it goes back in terms of having national days of prayer to George Washington, and every president since, almost every president since, has declared national days of prayer. And as I said, James Madison himself did that. So,
Christopher, why do you think the Obama administration is behind
James Madison was very, well, the Obama administration is afraid of being accused by people like your guest of being socialist and secular. It's the same reason why James Madison and Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine and many others were forced, and Benjamin Franklin.
The vast majority of American people have always been.
I'm very sorry to say, sir, that people of the stature even of Benjamin Franklin, as well as Mr. Paine, Mr. Madison, Mr. Jefferson, had to be very careful to keep their opinions to themselves, because your equivalents in those days threatened them with persecution if they were honest about the fact that they were not Christian.
Tony, I want to give you the final thought because we're
being voted out of office.
You can be proud of this great tradition of intolerance.
Look, this is a case of judicial arrogance and ignorance. This is a state level, a district level court judge who thinks they know better than the 230 plus years of history in this country and is setting precedent. And Congress should look into whether or not this judge should be impeached.
Tony Perkins, Christopher Hitchens.
There you are, perfect intolerance.
I appreciate both of you being on. Thank you, gentlemen.
Christopher Hitchens argues that the National Day of Prayer is unconstitutional because it puts the government in the business of promoting religion. The First Amendment says Congress cannot establish religion, and encouraging citizens to pray crosses that line. It turns a private belief into a public directive. The Constitution protects individual freedom, not religious endorsement. James Madison, one of its authors, later opposed government-led prayer and warned against mixing religion with state power. That aligns with Hitchens' argument. Tradition doesn't make something constitutional. Practices can exist for years and still violate core principles. What matters is whether the government stays neutral. If the state promotes prayer, it has to choose which belief system it represents. That creates unequal treatment by default. Hitchens' point is simple. Religion belongs to individuals, not the government.
Hello, everyone. I'm Claire Stewart. Thanks for joining us tonight. President Barack Obama says he will still recognize a National Day of Prayer, even though a federal judge has ruled it unconstitutional. A U.S. District Judge in Madison, Wisconsin, said the National Day of Prayer violates separation of church and state. The judge's order doesn't block a National Prayer Day until after all appeals are exhausted. Therefore, President Obama says the ruling doesn't prevent him from declaring May 6th as the National Day of Prayer. The ruling comes from a lawsuit filed against the federal government by the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That's the same group that recently sent a letter to the Birmingham City Council protesting the group's prayer before their meetings. We caught up with some West Alabamians to get their thoughts on the judge's ruling.
Not everyone believes in Christ, therefore, you forcing everyone to have a national prayer day is not being fair to all citizens. Some are Muslims, some are Buddhists, whatever.
I think that's the freedom of religion. I don't really see where the separation of church and state should give them the right to even make a ruling on it.
Oh, it's wrong. I mean, the bottom line, it's wrong. I mean, if you got a certain religion, or if you choose, to worship whatever you want to worship, you should be able to do that.
Recently, the Tuscaloosa County Commission received a letter from Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. It complained that the prayers before the commission meetings are all sectarian. Commissioner Reginald Murray told WVUA anyone is welcome to attend their meetings and lead their prayer.
There was established during the McCarthy period in the United States by Billy Graham and various other right-wing evangelicals, a panic resolution in Congress establishing a National Day of Prayer. National Day of Prayer. It was last week. An organization with which I'm associated, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, has secured a judgment from a judge in Madison, Wisconsin, which will now, I think, be heard by the Supreme Court, saying that that National Day of Prayer is unconstitutional. Americans can pray any time they like, but the government can't tell them to do so. Pretty simple proposition, you'd think. It takes forever to hammer this principle into people's heads. One way to do it is to say, all right, from tomorrow, all school children in America will have to pray. Billy Grahamites brighten up, say, but it'll be Hindu prayer. They say, we didn't mean that. We didn't say you didn't. Oh, or do you mean that what you said you wanted was a national day of Christian prayer? Or just Protestant Christian prayer, to be exact? Because otherwise we can say they'll all have to say Hail Mary in school, and surely that'll be just as good for their moral education. Or they'll all have to go to shul, or they'll all have to make the Muslim profession of faith. Surely any of these are better than secularism or atheism. They don't get it. What they don't understand is it's only people like myself, the secular forces, who say the government has no business here, who guarantee that they won't be oppressed by another religion. And it's, in other words, there is only one way in which any society has ever guaranteed religious freedom, and it's by a wall of separation between church and state. I really don't think that penny should have taken so long to drop, if I may say so.
How's your health? How's the treatment?
Though fighting cancer, Christopher Hitchens still scraps with religious leaders and debates over the existence of God. Hitchens is a writer best known to believers for his 2007 book, God is Not Great: How Religion Poisons Everything. Chemotherapy may have taken his hair, but his spirited opinions about religion have not been dampened by illness.
To hell with you is the response to the ones who pray for me to go to hell. Thanks but no thanks is the reply to those who want me to convert and recognize a divinity or deity. And good luck to those who pray for me to recover.
This is for my son, Charles.
Hitchens says he doesn't know how Everybody Pray for Hitchens Day began. He says it's one of those things that appeared on the internet and went viral.
I'm perfectly sure that there's nothing to be gained from it in point of my health, but perhaps I shouldn't even say that. I mean, if it would do something for my morale, that would do something for my health.
The head of the group sponsoring this event says he hasn't heard much about a prayer day for Hitchens except from the author himself.
For a man who says he really doesn't care whether people pray for him, he sure is making sure everyone knows about Pray for Christopher Hitchens Day, which amuses me. But will I pray for him? Yes, I have and do and will continue to do so.
Even though he doesn't expect an afterlife, Hitchens is thinking about his legacy.
It would please me if I was remembered for doing what I'm hoping to do again today, which is to make a stand for and give encouragement to those who are trying to uphold reason and science against superstition.
Tim McGuire, The Associated Press.
Hitchens pushes this further. Government prayer doesn't protect freedom, it threatens it. The moment the state promotes religion, it starts picking sides. And history shows exactly where that leads: conflict, control, and pressure to conform. Even if you're religious, think about it. Would you accept a government-led prayer from a different religion? Hindu, Muslim, or something else? Most people wouldn't. That proves the point. This isn't about faith, it's about power. Christianity often claims moral authority, but the Bible itself warns against public displays of prayer. In Matthew 6:5, it says not to pray publicly to be seen by others. Yet a national day of prayer does exactly that, turns belief into a public performance. Hitchens' position is simple and consistent. Keep religion personal. The only system that protects everyone, including Christians, is a strict separation between church and state. Without that, religion stops being a choice and starts becoming pressure.
You must have heard from people who are saying that they're praying for you, and also predictions of imminent, conversion. How you feel about people who either say that I'm praying for you,
Yes.
praying for your well-being.
Well, I get three kinds, I suppose, of communication of this sort. First is the people who pray for me to die, and also to then be reborn so I can suffer an eternity of torture. And then there are people who pray for me to get better. And then there are people who pray for me to get better and be converted, or be converted, or just to be converted. And to some of the Christian leadership who I know personally, I've debated with, who I've read about, asking for people to pray for me, I've written to say, do you mind if I just ask, pray for what? Because, it's what people normally say is, I'm praying for you. Well, that's not, I now want to know what that is. Or I'm curious. And they're mostly pretty honest. They say, obviously, we'd be glad if you got better. But principally, we're praying for you to see the light. And for those who wish that I'd see the light, well, again, they could ask that at any time. There's always struck me as something very objectionable in doing this stunt, or you might even say bringing this kind of pressure to bear on people who are in extremis. I don't mind for myself, and I'm fairly robust, mentally and physically, but there are a lot of people, and I've been in hospital with them, who are not so, who are in great pain and great distress of mind, and often in some decrepitude. It seems to me to send people around the wards talking to them in this way is actually very objectionable. I mean, what if we new atheists, we're sometimes called atheist fundamentalists, what if we went around the wards and said to people, so you're a Catholic, right? Yeah, well, why be a mug all your life? Why don't you, at the last minute, just lead a rational day for once and stop feeling any fear or shame or guilt? Guaranteed you'd feel better. Can't say you'd get better, but would feel better and be better. Well, they wouldn't like it, I don't think. And we'd certainly never dream of doing it. We say that to people when they're in the pink of health, and we have the chance to debate with them.
Hitchens makes this personal. Even while seriously ill, he rejected people pushing prayer onto him. Not because he was angry, but because it crosses a line. Turning someone's vulnerable moment into an opportunity for religious pressure is not compassion, it's intrusion. That connects directly to the National Day of Prayer. If it's wrong to pressure one person during illness, it's even worse when the government does it to an entire nation. It normalizes the idea that prayer should be expected, even when people don't share that belief. There's also no evidence prayer changes outcomes. Large studies, like the STEP study published in the American Heart Journal, found no measurable healing effect from intercessory prayer. In some cases, patients who knew they were being prayed for had higher complications, likely from stress. Hitchens stayed consistent. Belief should be personal, never imposed. Whether it's in a hospital room or at a national level, forcing prayer into people's lives crosses the same boundary. And yet, the National Day of Prayer still exists today. Do you think the government should be promoting prayer, or should it stay completely separate from religion? Comment your thoughts below. I want to hear what you think. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more.